I never thought I'd be the last guy left at a family reunion, and yet there I was, standing by the folding table with a half-eaten plate of mystery casserole, watching everyone else shuffle out like they had somewhere better to be. It was one of those sprawling backyard affairs that started with loud laughter and ended with awkward hugs and polite goodbyes. Except this time, I wasn't alone. Next to me was this guy, a cousin I'd barely met before today, named Ethan. Tall, easygoing, with a crooked smile that looked like it belonged to someone who'd just told a joke and was waiting for the punchline to land. We'd both been trying to dodge the repetitive small talk about how's work and still living in the city, and somehow ended up stuck together like the last two players in a game of musical chairs. Honestly, I wasn't expecting much from this reunion. Just a quick hello, some forced smiles, and an escape plan. But Ethan was different. There was something about the way he leaned casually against the fence, watching the sky turn that soft orange pink of early evening, like he was actually enjoying being there, even if no one else was. Our family's reunion was the kind of event where you show up mostly out of obligation. My relatives are nice enough, but we're scattered all over the place, and those connections get thin when you only see each other once a year over potato salad and awkward conversation. Ethan, it turns out, had been holed up in the city for a while too, working some tech job I could barely explain, and we swapped stories about the kind of cramped apartments and noisy neighbors that make city life a mix of charm and chaos. What started as small talk about neighborhood quirks turned into something quieter, more real. We found ourselves joking about the weird family dynamics, how everyone seemed to have a thing they wouldn't stop talking about, except us, who just wanted to find a corner to breathe. The sun dipped lower, and the crowd thinned, until it was just the two of us, standing under the big oak tree at the edge of the yard. I caught myself watching the way his eyes caught the light, the way his laugh came easy and unforced, and I realized this wasn't just about killing time anymore. There was a spark there, subtle but impossible to ignore, like a secret waiting to be shared. And as the last stragglers said their goodbyes and the evening settled into a quiet hush, I wondered, did he feel it too, or was I just imagining things? That's when Ethan turned to me, a little grin playing on his lips, and asked, "So what now? We the last two guys at this party. What's our move?" I hesitated, surprised by how much I wanted to say yes to whatever he had in mind. Because maybe, just maybe, this random family reunion wasn't going to end with me alone and stuck with casserole. Maybe it was just the start of something I hadn't been expecting at all. I shrugged, feeling the weight of the question more than I expected. I guess we could. I don't know, grab a beer or something? I mean, the party's officially over, unless you want to stick around and help clear up the mountain of paper plates. Ethan laughed, that easy, genuine kind of laugh that made the night air feel warmer. I'm not exactly the cleanup crew type, but a beer sounds good. We made our way back to the house, where the fridge still held a few bottles of cheap beer someone had brought. No fancy craft stuff, just the kind of beer that tastes like it's trying too hard to be acceptable at family gatherings. We cracked open two and stepped back outside, leaning against the railing of the deck. The backyard had changed since the afternoon. The golden sun had dipped below the horizon, and the sky was now a deep blue sprinkled with the first stars. The sounds of the neighborhood had softened, the distant bark of a dog, the faint hum of a car passing by. It felt calm, almost like we'd stumbled into a secret space that was ours alone. So, Ethan said, taking a swig, "How much of this family stuff do you usually put up with?" I laughed, the sound a little bitter. Not much, honestly. I come from my grandma. She still remembers everyone's birthdays without Facebook reminders. But mostly I just try to survive without getting roped into political debates or hearing about who's dating who for the 100th time. He nodded, eyes glinting. Yeah, that sounds about right. I'm usually the one who disappears into the garage or the basement to avoid the noise. Today was coincidence. Ended up talking to you because, well, someone had to stay sane. We both laughed again. It was the kind of easy connection you don't expect to find at a crowded family reunion, especially when you don't even know the guy that well. As the night deepened, the words started coming easier. We traded stories about growing up in different parts of the country, the awkwardness of being the new guy in a family branch you barely know, and the little things that make family reunions both miserable and memorable. Ethan's voice had a quiet sincerity that made me want to listen, like he wasn't just telling stories but sharing pieces of himself. At some point, I realized the beer was almost gone, and neither of us had moved from that spot on the deck. The air was cooler now, and I pulled my jacket a little tighter around me without really thinking about it. You ever think about just running away from it all? Like packing up and starting fresh somewhere no one knows your name? Ethan took a slow breath, then nodded. More than I care to admit. Sometimes I dream about a cabin somewhere quiet, no internet, no family drama, just peace. I smiled, leaning back. I get that. City's great, but it can feel like a cage sometimes. Like you're always on stage, performing, even when you don't want to. He looked at me then, eyes soft, and for a moment, it felt like we were the only two people in the world who understood what the other meant. So, what's your escape plan? I asked, half joking, half curious. Ethan shrugged, a little embarrassed. No plan, really. Just hoping for a sign, I guess. Something to tell me it's okay to take the leap. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, like the quiet after a good conversation, the kind where you don't have to fill every pause with words. Then, out of nowhere, Ethan laughed again. A little nervous this time. I guess being the last two guys at a family reunion isn't the worst place to find a sign, huh? I caught his gaze and felt a jolt. Like maybe this night was about more than just avoiding awkward small talk. Maybe not, I said, voice low. He shifted closer on the bench, and the world seemed to narrow until it was just the two of us, the quiet night, and a feeling I wasn't quite ready to name but didn't want to ignore. Neither of us said it aloud, but in that moment I knew this was the beginning of something unexpected and real. The kind of something you don't plan for but somehow can't walk away from. And all because we were the last two guys at a random family reunion. We stayed there for a while longer, just sitting side by side on that creaky wooden bench, the kind that always seems fragile but somehow hangs on because it's been part of the family property forever. I could hear Ethan's steady breathing, the occasional crack of a twig underfoot from a neighborhood cat, or maybe a raccoon rummaging in the bushes. The night wrapped around us like a soft blanket, and honestly, I was starting to forget the whole reunion even happened. After a few minutes, Ethan broke the silence. You ever been in one of those moments where you're not sure if you should say something or just let it hang in the air? He glanced sideways at me, a little shy, like he was about to confess something small but important. I knew exactly what he meant. All the time, mostly when I'm trying not to sound like a total idiot. He chuckled. Yeah, well, I guess that's what I'm doing now. I don't know why, but I feel like I can tell you stuff that I wouldn't normally say out loud. I nodded. Same here. Guess we're lucky to be the last two guys standing. He looked at me, eyes searching. Do you think people can, I don't know, just click like this? Like, not just friends, but something more? The question caught me off guard, but I didn't stumble over my answer. Yeah, I think it's rare, but when it happens, you just feel it, like the world gets quieter around you. He smiled softly, and I felt my heart pick up its pace. Good, because I think I'm feeling it right now. There it was, the moment I wasn't sure was going to come, but somehow hoped for anyway. I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of the space between us, the subtle shift in the air. I wanted to close the gap, but also didn't want to rush anything. Before I could say something, Ethan reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. It was a small gesture, but it hit me like a spark. I looked into his eyes, and everything was clearer, sharper, and a little dizzying. Would it be crazy if I said I wanted to kiss you? He asked quietly. I grinned before I even realized it. Not crazy at all. So I leaned in and we kissed under that vast starry sky, the kind of kiss you don't rehearse but just know how to do when the moment's right. It was soft and tentative at first, like testing the waters, but then it deepened, becoming more sure, more urgent. I felt warmth spread through me, a mix of relief and excitement, like I'd been holding my breath without realizing it. When we finally pulled apart, the silence felt different, full of possibility. Wow, Ethan said, laughing a little breathlessly. That was something. I smiled, feeling a grin that wouldn't quit. Yeah, something good. We stayed like that for a while, talking about everything and nothing, sharing bits of ourselves we'd kept tucked away. We swapped favorite movies, childhood embarrassments, and even our biggest fears. It felt like peeling back layers, honest and unguarded. At some point, Ethan asked, "So what happens now? Do we just pretend this was a one-time thing? Or?" I shrugged, though inside I was buzzing with hope. "Honestly, I don't want this to be a one-time thing. Maybe we could grab coffee tomorrow or something?" No family reunion required. He smiled, a little shy but hopeful. "I'd like that." Before long, the cold started creeping in, reminding us the night wasn't endless. We stood up, brushing off the dust from the bench, and for a moment, I hesitated, wondering if I should say something more. Then I just said, "Hey, Ethan? Yeah? Thanks for sticking it out with me tonight. For being the last guy standing." He laughed, the same easy laugh from earlier. "Right back at you." We parted ways that night with a promise to meet again, and for once, it didn't feel like a cliché. It felt like the start of something real. Walking back to my car, I couldn't stop smiling, replaying the whole evening over and over in my mind. Who knew that the last two guys left at a family reunion would find something neither of us was looking for, but both of us needed? Sometimes, the best things happen when you think the party's over. The next morning, I woke up with this strange mix of excitement and nerves buzzing in my chest. I hadn't felt that way in a long time, not since maybe college, when everything felt like it was just waiting to happen. I shot Ethan a text, something casual like, "Coffee today? Your place or mine?" Because at that point, I wasn't sure where we stood, but I knew I wanted to see him again. To my relief, he answered quickly, "Coffee sounds great. My place? I make a mean French press." I laughed to myself. "Deal. See you in an hour. See you then." I spent the time trying to look like I wasn't pacing around my apartment like a total mess. My brain was spinning with all the things I wanted to say and the ones I wanted to avoid, like how much I wanted this to work, but also how scared I was that it might not. When I got to Ethan's place, it was this cozy little apartment with big windows that let in way more light than my place ever did. He was standing there in a simple t-shirt and jeans, looking way too relaxed and confident for someone who'd just kissed me the night before and was probably feeling the same weird mix of excitement and nerves. "Hey," he said, grinning as I walked in. "Hey," I replied, trying not to sound like I was about to trip over my own feet. We settled into his small but comfortable living room, cups of coffee in hand, and suddenly the awkwardness melted away. We talked about everything. The weird family dynamics that brought us together, our jobs, the city, even the dumb little quirks we didn't usually share with strangers. At one point, Ethan laughed and said, "You know, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad the reunion dragged on as long as it did." "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Me too." As the morning stretched into afternoon, I realized something, that this wasn't just a fling born out of boredom at a family gathering. There was an easy connection here, one that felt solid and real. Ethan wasn't just some guy the first met at a random party. He was someone I wanted to know more deeply. There was a moment when our conversation dipped into quieter territory. He looked at me, his expression softer, almost vulnerable. "I haven't really told many people about how hard it's been moving back home. I thought I'd have this amazing support system, but it's been complicated." I nodded, understanding more than I let on. Family can be like that. Sometimes they surprise you with how much they don't get it, even when they try. He smiled faintly. "Yeah, but talking with you, it feels easier. Like maybe I'm not as alone as I thought." I reached out and took his hand. A simple gesture, but one that felt huge in that moment. "You're not." We stayed like that for a while, hands intertwined, the kind of silence that's full of something unspoken but powerful. Over the next few weeks, we slipped into an easy rhythm. We'd meet for coffee, go for long walks in the park, share dinners where we tried, and usually failed, to cook something fancy. It was the kind of slow burn that feels like it's happening in real life, not some movie script. But with every step forward, there was that shadow of uncertainty lurking in the back of my mind. This wasn't just about two guys who happened to be the last at a party anymore. It was about whether we could build something that lasted, in a world that's often set up to make things complicated for people like us. One evening, as we sat on Ethan's couch watching a ridiculously cheesy rom-com, he suddenly turned to me, eyes serious. "Can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "Are you scared?" I blinked. "Of what?" "Of this. Us. What it means if we really try." I thought about it. The truth was, yeah, I was scared. Scared of getting hurt, of falling for someone, and finding out he wasn't really there. Scared of all the what-ifs that come with opening yourself up. But looking at him, I realized that maybe being scared was part of the deal. Maybe it meant I was ready. "No," I said finally. "Not if I'm with you." He smiled then, this warm, genuine smile that made my heart hurt a little because it was so real. "Good, because I'm scared too." We leaned into each other, the kind of closeness that feels like coming home after a long journey. Looking back, it's kind of wild how everything changed, because we were the last two guys left at a random family reunion. But sometimes, the best stories start in the quietest, most unexpected moments, and maybe that's exactly how love works, showing up when you least expect it and staying when you need it most. After that night on his couch, things started to feel more real, more serious. Even if we never said it out loud, we weren't just two guys who happened to meet at a family reunion anymore. We were something. Whatever that something was, it felt important. I remember one afternoon when we decided to take a break from the usual coffee and movie routine and explore a nearby hiking trail. Neither of us were exactly outdoorsy types, but it felt like a good way to escape the noise of the city and everything else that buzzed in our heads. The trail was quiet, wooded, and sprinkled with patches of sunlight. We walked side by side, not rushing, just letting the conversation come naturally. At one point, Ethan stopped and pointed at a small cluster of wildflowers growing near the base of a tree. "Look at these. They're not flashy or anything, just quietly there. Kinda like us, huh?" I smiled, liking the comparison more than I expected. "Yeah, not loud or showy, but steady." He nodded, then glanced over at me with that crooked grin I'd come to know so well. Steady feels good. We kept walking, and I noticed how easy it was to be with him, like the outside world faded away and it was just us, two guys who'd somehow found something unexpected in the middle of a chaotic family reunion and city life. Later, when we reached a small clearing, Ethan sat down on a fallen log, patting the spot beside him. I joined him, and we just sat in silence for a while, watching the leaves rustle above us. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Do you think we're ready to tell people? Like, really tell them?" The question hit me like a surprise jolt. I hadn't really thought about it that way. We'd been careful, cautious, keeping things mostly between us. But maybe it was time. "I don't know," I admitted. "But if we want this to go somewhere, I guess we have to stop hiding." Ethan looked at me, eyes steady. "I'm scared of how some of my family will react. You know, small town, old-fashioned, but I'm more scared of not being honest." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "We'll figure it out, together." That's when the world felt a little less scary, because sometimes it's not about being fearless, but about choosing to face the fear with someone by your side. Over the next few weeks, we started telling more people. Close friends first, then a few family members. The reactions were mixed, some surprised, some supportive, and a couple that made it clear they didn't quite get it. One particularly tense moment came during a small family dinner when my aunt, after a few too many glasses of wine, asked if Ethan and I were just friends or something more serious. I looked at Ethan, who gave me a small nod, and I took a breath. "We're more than friends," I said quietly but firmly. The table went quiet for a beat, then my cousin broke into a smile. "About time you two told us." It was a relief, but also a reminder that not all moments would be easy. Still, through it all, Ethan and I leaned on each other, learning how to navigate this new territory. We had our share of arguments, mostly about silly stuff like whose turn it was to do the dishes or where to go on vacation, but also about deeper things like balancing our careers and figuring out what home really meant. One night, a few months after that first kiss, I was sitting on Ethan's couch, scrolling through photos on my phone when he came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my shoulders. "Hey," he said softly. "Hey," I replied without looking up. He kissed the top of my head, and I felt that familiar warmth spread through me. "I'm really glad you were the last guy at that reunion." I laughed. "Me too. Who knew losing the crowd could be this good?" He smiled. "Here's to being the last two standing." I looked up at him, and in that moment, with all the noise of the past months behind us and the quiet promise of what lay ahead, I realized something pretty incredible. Sometimes, the best love stories don't start with fireworks or grand gestures. Sometimes, they start with two guys standing alone in a backyard, surrounded by empty plates and fading sunlight, just willing to take a chance. And if we're lucky, they keep going, long after the last guest has left. In the months that followed, Ethan and I settled into a rhythm that felt both comforting and new. We were carving out a space for ourselves in a world that sometimes felt like it wasn't quite ready for the two of us, but that only made the times we had together feel that much more precious. Our relationship was still young, but it was growing roots, steady and strong. One Saturday morning, I found myself standing in Ethan's kitchen, awkwardly attempting to make pancakes while he leaned against the counter, watching me with that familiar crooked smile. "You're making a mess," he teased, reaching over to wipe some batter off the counter. "Hey, I'm trying," I shot back, laughing despite the mess. He shook his head, amusement twinkling in his eyes. "You know, I could help." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh yeah? I thought you were the one who said you please me at cooking." "That was before I learned from the master," he said, grinning. For a moment, the kitchen was filled with laughter, the kind that sneaks up and makes you forget everything else. It was these small moments, making pancakes, sharing a blanket on the couch, talking through the late hours, that started to feel like home. After breakfast, we decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. The city was waking up, streets slowly buzzing with life. We wandered without a plan, just following wherever the sidewalk led us. At one point, Ethan stopped and looked around. "You ever think about how different things would be if we'd met somewhere else? Like, not at that family reunion?" I thought about it for a second. I guess. But maybe some things are meant to happen exactly when and where they do. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I guess I'm glad we ended up the last two guys standing." We kept walking, and then I caught him looking at me with that soft expression that always made my heart skip a beat. "Hey," I said, nudging him gently. "I'm really happy we found each other." "Me too," he replied, squeezing my hand. "But you know, I've been thinking." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh?" He hesitated, like he was gathering his words carefully. "I want us to start thinking about the future. Not like immediately moving in together or anything crazy, but, you know, what comes next?" I smiled, feeling a warmth spread through me. "Yeah, I've been thinking about that too." Over the next few weeks, we talked more seriously about what we wanted, our goals, fears, and how to balance our lives together. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes the conversations brought up doubts or worries, but those moments felt important, like laying the foundation for whatever came next. One evening, after a long day at work, I dropped by Ethan's place unannounced. When he opened the door, tired but smiling, I pulled him into a hug. "I've been thinking," I started. "Maybe it's time we take that next step. I mean, we're already spending most of our time together anyway." He looked surprised but pleased. "Are you saying you want to move in?" I nodded. "Yeah, if you're up for it." His grin was infectious. "Absolutely." A few weeks later, we found a small apartment that felt just right. Not too big, not too small, and perfect for two people who were still figuring it all out. Moving day was chaotic in the best way. Boxes everywhere, mismatched furniture, and a sense of excitement wrapped around every corner. We laughed as we assembled a bookshelf that took way longer than it should have, and shared a pizza on the floor, surrounded by unpacked stuff. That night, lying side by side in our new place, I felt a deep sense of contentment. This was more than I dared hope for when I was standing alone at that family reunion, clutching a plate of cold casserole. Ethan reached over, brushing a strand of hair from my forehead. "You know," he whispered, "I think this is just the beginning." I smiled, heart full. "Yeah, the last two guys at a family reunion. I'm glad we stuck it out." And as I drifted off to sleep, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Because sometimes, the most unexpected endings turn out to be the best beginnings. Months slipped by in a blur of ordinary days, filled with quiet moments and shared routines. There were no grand declarations or sweeping gestures, just the kind of steady, gentle closeness that grows when two people truly start to build a life together. Moving in with Ethan wasn't some dramatic milestone. It was more like discovering a new layer of comfort I didn't know I'd been missing. One evening, a few weeks after we'd settled into the apartment, we found ourselves on the small balcony, sipping cheap wine and watching the city lights flicker to life. The air was cool, but the silence between us felt warm, the kind of peacefulness that only comes from years of getting comfortable with someone else's presence. I reached out and took Ethan's hand, feeling the familiar strength in his fingers. You ever think about how we ended up here? From being the last two guys at that family reunion to this, our own place, just us? He smiled, eyes reflecting the distant glow of street lamps. All the time. It still surprises me, but I'm grateful, more than I can really say. There was no need for fancy words or dramatic promises. In that moment, everything felt clear. We had found something rare and real. A partnership built on honesty, patience, and the kind of quiet understanding that doesn't need to be loud to be true. I guess it's funny, I said, squeezing his hand gently, how sometimes the best things happen when you least expect them. Like a slow unfolding, rather than a fireworks show. Ethan laughed softly. Yeah. I wouldn't trade this for anything. We stood there for a while longer, wrapped in the simple comfort of each other's company, feeling like we'd arrived somewhere we'd never known we were searching for. It wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about the little things. Shared breakfasts, whispered conversations in the dark, and the steady assurance that we were in this together. Looking back, I realized that being the last two guys at that random family reunion wasn't just coincidence. It was the start of a story neither of us saw coming, but both needed more than we knew. And as the city hummed softly beneath us, I felt certain that, whatever the future held, we'd face it side by side, because sometimes the quietest moments leave the loudest echoes. And this was ours.